What happens when a Hollywood superstar walks onto a daytime talk show stage expecting a friendly chat and instead finds himself in the middle of a tense on-air clash? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The studio lights hit Chris Pratt as he steps onto the set with that familiar easy smile, the kind that usually puts audiences at ease. The crowd cheers loudly, some whistling, some clapping with real excitement, and Chris gives a quick wave before settling into his seat next to the hosts. He looks relaxed, maybe even excited, settling into the kind of interview he's done hundreds of times before. The panel greets him warmly at first. It feels like any other day on the show. But there's a very different energy just under the surface, and you can feel it within the first minute. Whoopi Goldberg leans forward slightly in her chair, glasses low on her nose, watching him with that familiar mix of curiosity and challenge she brings when she's ready to dive into something serious. Sunny Hostin gives Chris a polite nod. Joy Behar adjusts her cards. Sarah Haynes smiles brightly. Everything feels standard, the calm before the storm. Chris laughs lightly as they start with a topic about his new project, a family comedy he's clearly proud of. He talks about filming, about the cast, about juggling work and family. The audience laughs at one of his stories about being tackled by kids on set during a break. All is well. All is easy. Until it isn't. Whoopi waits until he finishes a sentence, then shifts her posture, clearing her throat in that way she does when she's about to pivot the discussion. The change is subtle, but the tension hits instantly. Even the audience seems to sense the shift. So Chris, Whoopi says calmly, you've talked a lot about positivity, faith, and setting a good example. Which is great. But we have to talk about something that's been everywhere online. And I think you know what I'm bringing up. The audience murmurs. Chris's smile tightens just barely. He nods slowly. I figured that might come up, yeah. Joy cuts in. Of course it's going to come up. It blew up everywhere last week. Chris exhales through his nose, still trying to maintain a friendly tone. I get that people have questions. I just hope we can talk about it respectfully. Whoopi raises her eyebrows. Respectfully is exactly what I want. But people had strong reactions to what you said. Some felt it was dismissive, maybe even hurtful. Chris blinks, surprised. Hurtful? I don't think that was my intention at all. Sarah jumps in quickly, trying to mediate. I think what Whoop is saying is that the phrasing caught attention, maybe not in the way you expected. Sunny folds her hands deliberately. Intent doesn't always match perception. As soon as she says it, the audience gives that low collective hum, half agreement, half waiting for what comes next. Chris sits up straighter. I understand that. But I also think people sometimes jump to conclusions. I made a comment about being grateful for my family. I didn't think that would turn into whatever this became. Whoopi leans in slightly, not hostile, but firm. But Chris, people felt that it implied something about someone else in your life. That's where the reaction came from. The audience murmurs again. Chris shakes his head. That wasn't what I meant. I've said that multiple times. Whoopi doesn't back down. But you understand why people interpreted it that way, right? You understand why folks got upset. There's a brief silence. The kind that feels longer than it is because nobody wants to move too quickly. Chris looks at her, measured. I think people want to be upset sometimes. I think everything gets blown out of proportion. I wasn't trying to attack anyone. I was expressing gratitude. Joy interrupts sharply. But Chris, you know how social media is. They twist things. Chris responds with a half laugh, half sigh. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Whoopi shakes her head slowly. But it's not just social media. Some people close to the situation felt the same way. The words land heavily. The audience reacts immediately, gasps, whispers, shifting in seats. Chris's expression changes. Not angry, but stunned. He clearly wasn't expecting that statement. Sunny steps in again. Whoopi is saying this because she's heard it too. This wasn't just Twitter. Chris takes a second before responding. Well, I don't know what to say to that. Because I know my truth. I know what I meant. Sarah tries to lighten the moment with a soft laugh. Communication is tricky. But Whoopi doesn't let the transition happen. Chris, she says, voice calm but unwavering, if people felt hurt, shouldn't you at least acknowledge that? Even if it wasn't your intention. Chris looks right at her now. No more polite laughter. No more soft tone. Whoopi, I've acknowledged that multiple times. I've said I didn't mean it to hurt anyone. But I'm not going to apologize for something that people invented in their heads. That's not fair. The room reacts instantly. Half the audience gasps. A few clap. A few murmur nervously. Someone lets out a quiet wow. Whoopi's face changes, not angry, but sharper, more direct. She adjusts her glasses with deliberate slowness. So you're saying people imagine the impact? Chris nods once. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think people look for conflict even when none exists. Joy lets out a loud oh boy, triggering another wave of audience reactions. Sunny raises an eyebrow. So there's no validity at all to the criticism. Chris responds firmly, not in the way it's being framed. No. Whoopi leans back, lips pursed. Well, that's certainly one way to look at it. Chris doesn't break eye contact. It's the truthful way. More audience noise, some supportive, some stunned. Sarah tries again to mediate. Maybe there's middle ground. But Whoopi interrupts softly. I'm just trying to understand how you dismiss all of that so easily. Chris finally pushes back with clear irritation. I'm not dismissing anything. I'm clarifying. There's a difference. The tension is thick now. It's not a meltdown, not a shouting match, but a real, genuine clash in tone, in perspective, and in patience. Exactly the kind of thing that happens when a guest is pushed further than they expect on live TV. The hosts exchange looks. The audience senses something is about to escalate. Chris's expression has shifted from relaxed to defensive. Whoopi's from neutral to focused. Sunny is watching carefully. Joy is amused and concerned at the same time. And Sarah is trying to keep the conversation from blowing up. And just as the energy feels like it might tip over the edge, Whoopi prepares another pointed question, one that feels like it might push Chris past his limit. Whoopi takes a breath, the kind she only uses when she's about to say something that will land heavy, and the entire table subtly shifts toward her without even realizing it. The audience goes quiet again. Chris sits up straighter, hands clasped in front of him, prepared but clearly bracing for whatever is coming next. Here's what I'm trying to get at, Whoopi says, keeping her tone even. When you talk about your family publicly, people notice every word. That's the reality. Whether you like it or not, you're a public figure. And when your words sound like they are pointed, even indirectly, people respond. So my question is, do you understand why some people think you were taking a dig at your ex? A loud wave of ooh rolls through the audience. Some clap. Others shake their heads. The tension spikes instantly. Chris leans forward, unblinking. I wasn't taking a dig at anyone. Not even remotely. And I think it's unfair to assume that every personal expression of gratitude is some coded message aimed at someone else. Sunny jumps in softly, but you can see how that phrasing. Chris cuts in, not aggressively, but with clear irritation. I can see how people who want drama will twist it. Sure. That triggers another round of gasps. Joy's eyes widen. Sarah mouths okay, under her breath. Whoopi raises her hand slightly. No one's twisting anything. We're talking about how people perceived it. Chris shakes his head again. But perception isn't fact. Sometimes it's valid, Whoopi replies calmly. And sometimes it's just noise, Chris shoots back. The audience reacts loudly, some cheering him, others clearly uncomfortable. Sarah tries to lighten the air. Okay, let's slow down just a bit. But Whoopi isn't moving on. Not yet. I'm asking you because you're here. And you've got a platform to clarify. That's all. Chris's jaw tenses. I feel like I've been clarifying for months, Whoopi. Sunny nods. You have addressed it before, that's true. Joy adds, and people didn't buy it, Chris. That's why it's still being talked about. Chris turns to Joy. I can't control whether people buy it. I can only tell the truth. Joy shrugs. Fair point. Whoopi looks right at Chris again, clearly not intimidated, clearly not giving up the line of questioning. So let me ask you this. If someone close to you said they were hurt by the comment, hypothetically, would that matter to you? Chris hesitates. His eyes flicker for a moment, just enough that everyone at the table picks up on it. The audience senses it too. That tiny flicker is all it takes for the mood to deepen, the silence to thicken. Of course it would matter to me, Chris says finally, voice lower. I'm not a robot. I care how people feel. Sunny leans in. But that's the thing. You've never directly said whether you understand the emotional reaction from someone who might have felt. Chris cuts her off abruptly. Because I'm not going to speak for people who haven't spoken to me directly. That's not fair. Sarah nods gently. So no conversations happened behind the scenes. Chris closes his eyes for a second, only a second, but on live television, even a blink carries weight. That's personal, he says. Whoopi responds instantly, but the comment was public. And now the audience erupts. Some clap loudly at Whoopi's point. Others groan, feeling the pressure building. Chris looks genuinely frustrated now. So because I said something positive about my family, I'm obligated to answer every personal speculation thrown my way. Sunny, trying to stay neutral, replies, not obligated. Just, given the reaction, people want clarity. Chris gestures slightly with his hands. And I've given it. Multiple times. I wasn't targeting anyone. I wasn't shading anyone. I was expressing gratitude for my life. Whoopi gives a small nod. But you know people felt differently. Chris meets her eyes again. This time, he doesn't back away. People will always feel differently about everything. I can't manage the world's emotions. Joy sighs dramatically. Well, you know, being famous is rough, honey. That earns laughter from the audience, easing the tension for a moment. Chris cracks a small smile, but it fades quickly when Whoopi speaks again. There's a difference between criticism and people actually expressing hurt, Whoopi says slowly. You keep saying folks invented it, but feelings aren't inventions. Chris replies, when feelings are based on an assumption that isn't true, then yes, they are built on something invented. The audience gasps yet again, louder this time. People are whispering, reacting, shifting in their seats. A few laugh nervously. Someone claps once, loudly, before stopping. Sunny raises an eyebrow at Chris. That's strong wording. Chris doesn't soften it. It's honest wording. Whoopi sits back slightly. So you're doubling down. Chris shakes his head with a faint, almost amused frustration. I'm telling the truth. That's all I can do. That's all anyone can do. Sarah tries again to pivot. Maybe instead of focusing on who took it what way, maybe we could talk about the bigger issue here, how public comments get dissected. But Whoopi doesn't let it go yet. I want to ask just one more thing, Chris. Chris looks at her with a guarded expression. Okay. Do you regret saying it the way you said it? Whoopi asks. The question lands hard. The audience falls silent. No whispers. No movement. Just silence. Chris inhales slowly. No. I don't regret expressing love for my family. I never will. Whoopi nods but doesn't look convinced, even knowing the reaction it caused. Chris leans forward slightly, voice steady. The reaction was about something I didn't say. Something people projected. I'm not going to reshape my gratitude just to avoid someone else's assumptions. Joy mutters under her breath, loud enough for the MIC to catch. He's standing his ground, that's for sure. The audience laughs, breaking the tension again, but it doesn't last. Whoopi gives Chris a measured look. You understand that some people watching right now might feel like you're dismissing their feelings. Chris shakes his head immediately. I'm not dismissing anyone's feelings. I'm saying I can't take responsibility for interpretations that weren't based on what I actually said. That's not the same thing. Sunny nods thoughtfully. That's fair on a logical level. But emotionally, Whoopi adds, there's still impact. Chris finally pushes back, not loudly, but firmly enough to shift the whole tone of the room. Whoopi, with all due respect, you're asking me to apologize for something I didn't do. And I'm not going to do that. The audience reacts instantly. Cheers, gasps, murmurs everywhere. Whoopi looks at him, eyebrows raised. I never asked you to apologize. Chris replies, it feels like it. Sunny quickly interjects. I don't think that's what Whoopi meant. But Whoopi lifts her hand slightly to stop her. I can speak for myself. Chris nods, eyes locked on her. And for a moment, just a moment, the two stare at each other with a mixture of respect and tension, the kind that only happens when two people genuinely disagree and neither one is willing to back down. Sarah finally breaks the silence. Okay, this is obviously a passionate conversation. Let's all just breathe for a second. The audience laughs lightly, relieved to have the pressure released, even for a moment. But the energy remains heavy, charged, unsteady, like something big is still waiting to surface. And the moment Sarah thinks things have calmed enough to move on, Whoopi adjusts herself in her seat again, ready with a follow-up question that looks like it might go even deeper. Whoopi glances down at her cards, then back up at Chris with a look that makes the whole room tense instantly. Even the hosts seem to brace themselves. Whatever she's about to ask, it's clear it won't be soft. Okay, she says slowly. Here's something I think we need to talk about. Because it didn't just stop at the comment itself. Afterward, when the reaction blew up, you doubled down online. You joked about it. You made light of the backlash. And a lot of folks felt like you were mocking the people who said they were hurt. The moment she says it, the audience reacts with a loud collective ooh. Some clap. Others shift uncomfortably. Joy mutters under her breath, "Here we go," while Sarah takes a deep inhale as if preparing for impact. Chris doesn't smile. "I wasn't mocking anyone. I was trying to keep things positive." Whoopi interrupts immediately, but it didn't come across that way. Chris shakes his head. "Everything doesn't have to be taken in the worst possible way, Whoopi." Joy whistles softly. "Oh boy," earning laughter from a portion of the crowd. Sunny folds her hands. "Chris, the issue people had wasn't that you responded, it's how you responded. They felt like you brushed the criticism off." Chris stares at her, calm but firm, because the criticism wasn't based on reality. Whoopi leans forward. "But the feelings were real." "And I hear that," Chris says, raising his voice a little, not shouting, but frustrated. "I hear that people felt a certain way. But what do you want me to do? Pretend the meaning they invented is true?" The audience reacts loudly again. Some clap. Some gasp. The energy is almost chaotic. Sarah tries to soften things. "I think what Whoopi is saying is feelings aren't always rational, but they are still feelings." Chris throws his hands slightly. "Yes, and I get that. I respect feelings. But I can't be responsible for conclusions I didn't create." Sunny tilts her head thoughtfully. "Intent versus impact." Chris nods. "Sure. But when impact is based on a total misinterpretation, at what point am I allowed to say, 'No, that's not on me'?" Whoopi doesn't hesitate. "When the hurt comes from someone close to you. That's when." The crowd goes wild, gasps, whispers, claps, murmurs. It's one of those moments where the show turns into a pressure cooker. Chris freezes for a second, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in disbelief. "Whoopi, you don't know anything about my personal conversations." Whoopi nods once. "That's why I said earlier, hypothetically." Chris lets out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Come on. You know exactly what you're doing with that word." Joy looks between the two of them, eyebrows raised. She's poking the bear a little. The audience laughs nervously, but Chris doesn't. He keeps his eyes on Whoopi. "Look," he says slowly, "I'm not dragging anyone through the mud. I'm not airing out personal history. I've never done that. I won't start now." Sunny nods. "And that's admirable. It really is." "Thank you," Chris replies. "But," Whoopi cuts in again, "you understand that people didn't see it that way. They saw a man praising one family in a way that sounded like a slight toward another." Chris stares at her with an intensity that makes the audience go quiet. Completely quiet. "And I'm telling you, that wasn't my intention," he says. "And I'm not going to rewrite my gratitude just because the internet is looking for something to fight about." Whoopi folds her arms. "You keep blaming the internet." Chris shrugs. "Because that's where most of this anger exists." Sunny leans forward. "But it didn't start there, Chris." He looks at her. "Are you saying someone personally came to you? Or to Whoopi? Or anyone here and said they were hurt? Because unless you've talked to people I haven't heard from, all of this is based on the online conversation." Sarah nods carefully. "But that online conversation still matters." Chris responds immediately. "It matters when it's true. It matters when there's something real behind it. But I'm not going to accept a narrative that people invented out of thin air." Whoopi raises an eyebrow. "People don't invent feelings out of thin air." "Sometimes they do," Chris replies sharply. The audience gasps again. The room feels electric, heavy, unpredictable. Sunny sets her hands on the table. "Okay, let me ask this another way. Is there anything you would say differently now, knowing how it all spiraled?" Chris thinks for a moment, then shakes his head. "No. I expressed love and gratitude for my family. I don't regret that. And I won't." Whoopi tilts her head. "Even if someone you care about felt overshadowed by that comment." Chris doesn't blink. "I can't speak to a hypothetical scenario about someone's hypothetical feelings." Joy snorts. "That's fair. Hypotheticals drive me crazy too." Sarah laughs lightly. "We are spiraling in circles." Chris leans back a bit, trying to de-escalate. "Look, I'm not here to fight anyone. I respect you all. I respect the show. I respect the viewers. But I have to stand by my actual words, not the words people projected onto me." Whoopi jumps in quickly. but you're also dismissing the possibility that your wording could have been different. Chris raises his eyebrows. Do you want me to stop saying I love my family? Because that's not happening. That's not what anyone is saying, Whoopi replies. It feels like it, Chris says plainly. The audience murmurs sympathetically. Some clap. Some sigh. The tension is reaching a new height, but it's controlled, real, live TV controlled. The way hosts and guests navigate uncomfortable moments in real time without letting it completely derail. Sunny tries again to calm the tone. Maybe we're focusing too much on blame. Maybe we should talk about responsibility. Chris turns to her. Responsibility for what? Loving my family publicly. Sunny clarifies. Responsibility for how your words land. Chris nods slowly. I hear you. But there's also responsibility on the part of listeners to not twist something positive into something negative. Whoopi cuts in. But feelings aren't twists. Chris replies instantly. They are when they are based on fiction. Gasps again. Sarah physically jolts a little. Joy puts a hand to her chest dramatically. Someone in the audience whispers, "Oh my God." Whoopi gives Chris a long, steady look. So you're shutting down the idea entirely. There's no room in your mind for people to have heard it differently. Chris shakes his head. People can hear whatever they want. But I'm allowed to say that what they heard wasn't what I said. That earns applause from a section of the audience. Big applause. Others stay quiet, watching Whoopi's reaction. She doesn't back off. You're very set in your perspective. Chris nods again. Because I know what I meant. And that matters. Sunny watches him thoughtfully. Do you think you're being defensive? Chris laughs softly, but not happily. Yes, I'm being defensive. Because I'm defending myself against something I didn't do. The crowd responds with mixed sounds, some supportive, some uneasy. Whoopi leans in once more. I'm not saying you meant harm. I'm saying harm was felt. Chris pauses. Really pauses. The audience leans forward, waiting. And I'm saying, he answers slowly, that the harm people felt wasn't caused by me. It was caused by an assumption they created. The audience erupts yet again, this time louder than before. The energy is starting to boil over, and everyone on the panel feels it. Sarah's eyes are wide. Joy looks like she wants popcorn. Sunny looks concerned. Whoopi is unfazed. And as the escalation hits its peak, Whoopi opens her mouth to ask yet another deeper, heavier question. One that feels like it could push Chris further than anything asked so far. Whoopi doesn't look away from Chris as the audience noise settles. She studies him for a long moment, clearly deciding whether to push further or shift the tone. The room is so quiet you can hear someone coughing faintly in the back row. Then Whoopi finally speaks, her voice calm but pointed. Chris, if someone close to you came out tomorrow and said they really were hurt, genuinely hurt, not the internet, not strangers, would you still feel the same way you do right now? The question is simple, but it hits harder than anything she's asked so far. The audience reacts instantly, gasps, murmurs, scattered applause. The tension snaps right back to the surface, thicker than before. Chris doesn't answer right away. He presses his lips together, thinking. Really thinking. The frustration on his face hasn't left, but it isn't anger, it's something more complicated. Disappointment. Exhaustion. Maybe even hurt of his own. He begins slowly, choosing every word. If someone close to me, someone I genuinely care about, came to me and said they were hurt, then yes, I would care. Of course I would. I'd listen. I'd talk to them. I'm not cold. I'm not insensitive. But that conversation would be private. Between us. Not for a camera. Not for a headline. And not for the internet to turn into another circus. The audience applauds, loudly this time. Real applause, the kind that carries warmth, not shock. Sarah nods. Joy claps twice. Even Sunny seems to soften a little. Whoopi doesn't clap. She watches him closely, considering his words. Chris goes on. But I'm not going to respond to people online demanding an apology for something I didn't do. I won't do that. I'm a person too. I have a right to defend my intentions. Sunny nods gently. And that's fair. Joy jumps in. Social media wants blood. Every time. They love outrage. The audience laughs knowingly. Chris runs a hand through his hair. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to protect myself from. I'm not playing their game. Whoopi lets the applause die down before she responds. Nobody here is asking you to play a game, Chris. He looks back at her. It feels like it. No, Whoopi says plainly. We're asking you to acknowledge that when you put something out publicly, it can land differently than you expect. That's not an attack. That's reality. Chris exhales. I understand that. I do. But there's a line between acknowledging reality and accepting a narrative that isn't true. And you're saying this narrative isn't true, Whoopi responds. Correct, Chris says firmly. It's not. A moment of silence follows. Saya looks between them as if waiting for a sign that the tension is easing, but neither Chris nor Whoopi flinches. Joy finally breaks the quiet. All right, I think we need some air in here. I'm starting to sweat. The audience laughs again, grateful for the release. Even Chris cracks a tiny smile. Sunny turns to Chris. Let me shift for just a moment. You're obviously passionate about your family. That's clear. So let me ask you something lighter. How do they feel about all this? Not the controversy, but you being so open about them? Do they support you being this public? Chris nods, relieved for a beat. They do. They really do. We talk about it a lot. I'm protective, but I'm also proud of them. My wife supports me. My kids, they are young, so they don't get the internet stuff. Thank God. But we're a strong family. We communicate. Good, Sunny says warmly. That matters. Absolutely, Chris replies. Whoopi jumps in again, gentler this time. And nobody here doubts that you love your family. I don't doubt that. The conversation was never about your love. It was about how the message was received. Chris softens slightly. I know that's your perspective. But you don't share it, Whoopi says. Chris shakes his head. No, I don't. But I respect that you have it. Whoopi nods once. Fair. It's the first moment where the two seem to meet in the middle, still not agreeing, but acknowledging each other. The audience gives a soft applause, sensing that the temperature has finally dropped a few degrees. Sarah claps lightly. Progress. Look at us. Joy jokes. We should all get a cookie. The audience laughs again, easing the room further. Chris sighs with a little smile. Look, I know I come off strong. I know I sound defensive. But when something gets blown up that you know in your heart is not what people are saying it is, it's hard not to defend yourself. Sunny nods sympathetically. Fame magnifies everything. Oh, tell me about it, Chris says, chuckling. Joy jumps in. And everything becomes a political statement. Even a pancake recipe these days. The crowd laughs loud and hard at that. Exactly. Chris says through a laugh. You breathe wrong, and it's trending. The laughter grows, and the tension finally begins to dissolve for real. Whoopi even cracks a small smile as she says, Well, you definitely breathed wrong that day. Chris laughs, raising his hands in mock surrender. Apparently. The audience roars with laughter. The mood shifts entirely, lighter, warmer, more forgiving. The earlier clash still hangs in the air, but it feels more like the kind of clash families have, not enemies. Saya finally touches Chris's arm lightly. We appreciate you coming here. Truly. Not everyone would sit in the hot seat the way you have. Chris nods sincerely. I respect all of you. And I respect a real conversation. Even the tough ones. Whoopi gives a slow nod of acknowledgement, not approval, not agreement, but respect. And we appreciate you answering the questions, even the uncomfortable ones. Chris returns the nod. Thank you. The audience applauds again, this time warmly, genuinely. Joy leans toward her mic. Well, folks, I'm sure social media is typing faster than the speed of light right now. Everyone laughs. Chris shakes his head knowingly. Oh, I'm sure. Sunny adds, this conversation is definitely going to trend. Chris sighs dramatically. Great. Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Whoopi shrugs. Well, that's the price of being charming and controversial at the same time. Chris laughs. I'll take charming. Sarah jokes. Maybe not controversial for the rest of the week. Chris raises a hand. I make no promises. The audience laughs again, and the atmosphere finally feels like a talk show again, not a battleground, but a lively, messy, honest moment. As the segment wraps, the producers signal the hosts. Whoopi looks into the camera. Well, she says, I think we've had a conversation today. A real one. Sunny adds, people at home are definitely going to have opinions. Joy smirks. Oh, they always do. Chris laughs, rubbing his forehead. I've accepted my fate. Sarah leans in. Thank you for being here and for sticking with this conversation. We appreciate it. Chris nods sincerely. Thank you for having me. The hosts wave as the audience cheers, some still whispering, some shaking their heads, others smiling. The air is buzzing with the kind of energy only live tension can create. And after the show wraps, the ripple begins almost immediately. Clips hit social media within minutes: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Some praising Chris for standing his ground. Others praising Whoopi for pushing for accountability. The debate becomes a storm. Hashtags form. News outlets grab the segment. Fan pages dissect every moment. Comment sections explode. Meanwhile, backstage, Chris takes a breath, meets a producer, and offers a polite, tired smile. Not angry. Not defeated. Just human. Someone who walked into a friendly interview and found himself in an emotional crossfire he tried to navigate as honestly as he could. And that's the story. Make sure to share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.